Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. I'm Ian McCollum, and today we are taking a look at the L8 rifle. This is the last gasp of the number 4 Lee Enfield. So this is the number 4 Lee Enfield converted to 7.62mm NATO. And of course this happens after the adoption of the NATO cartridge. The British Army adopts the L1A1 as the FAL. By the way, in the process, they adopt this new L designation. So previously they had rifle numbers. You had rifle number 1 Mark III was the original SMLE. Rifle number 4 was the standard World War II Lee Enfield. Number 5 was the Jungle Carbine. And they converted that to a series of L, A, and N numbers. So the L1A1 was the first iteration of the Land Service Rifle, the FAL. This was designated Rifle L8. And there were actually 5 different versions of this. There was the L8A1 through the L8A5. However, in truly classic British style, those don't actually indicate any difference between the final product at all. Those are simply indicative of what model of rifle was converted into the L8 in the first place. So if you took a number 4 Mark II and converted it, it became an L8A1. If you took a number 4 Mark I, it became an L8A4. If you took a number 4 Mark I Star, it became an L8A5. And this is kind of ridiculous, but it's also technically useful because if some part breaks on the rifle, it would potentially be a part from the original unconverted version of the rifle, and so you need to know what part to get to fix it. Long story short, the L8 is all the L8. 5 versions, they're all the same. So let me show you up close exactly how they did this, because there are actually a bunch of things that they had to change to do what seems like a simple caliber conversion. This conversion was originally intended to be something that could be done at a unit armorer level. That never actually happened, so they were all done at the factory. And so what you'll see for markings are the original rifle designation lined out. This was a number 4 Mark II F Fazakerley. And then the new markings back here, move the safety out of the way, rifle 7.62 L8A1, that's because this was a Mark II. And then this conversion was done in 1960. Now to do the conversion, they had to put in a new barrel in each rifle. That was of course a 7.62 caliber barrel with a NATO chamber. The next most significant thing would be replacing the magazine with a new magazine that was cut to fit the rimless 7.62 NATO cartridge. These will be marked. I believe this is actually an L42A1 magazine. That's CR141A as an assembly for the magazine. The L8 magazines were CR12A, and then also a year of production. So this is a 1965 made magazine. Now if we look at this, you can see the follower is substantially different from a standard 303 magazine, and more significantly, they have spot welded on an ejector here on the rear left magazine feed lip. Because of the change from rimmed to rimless ammunition, they had to change the ejectors in the rifles, and it was easier to just add the ejector to the rear lip of the magazine than to try and fit new ejectors into the rifles themselves. So when you look at this from the top, you can see that the ejector sticks up, and as the bolt is pulling the case back, the case edge will hit on this, and that will flip the empty case out of the rifle. There was some machining, not a lot, but some machining that was required on the inside of the receiver to fit the new profile of magazine. New bolt heads were needed to fit the 7.62 cartridge, the rimless case, new extractors, and these were proofed to 19 tons. So there is the new proof mark that you should see on a correct L8 bolt head, and you'll also find it on the bolt stem there. Well, that covers most of the obvious mechanical components, new bolt, new magazine, new barrel. However, you do also have to consider the sights. The 7.62 NATO cartridge is a higher velocity, flatter shooting cartridge than the original 303 British, so one would assume you have to change up the sights. Well, not necessarily. The stated fact, assuming that it is actually true, is that if you simply kept the exact same sight gradations, but you read them as meters instead of yards, because on an original number 4, this rear sight would have been calibrated in yards. Once the NATO cartridge is adopted, the UK military is now working in meters instead. What they claimed was that this, at least up to 800, the change in range from yards to meters balanced out the change in trajectory of the cartridge, and the original sight leaf worked just fine. I have no idea how true that really is. That would be an interesting thing to test out, in theory. I believe Sterling on their kits, which we'll talk about in a few minutes, did actually offer a replacement rear sight calibrated up to 1,000 meters if someone wanted it. And the one last change would be to the charger guide. Converting or changing from 303 stripper clips to 762 NATO stripper clips. The new clip is narrower in width, and so it wouldn't really fit effectively in the original charger guide. So they made a stamped, simple sheet metal insert that went into the charger guide to properly size it for 762 NATO. So those were added. And I think that pretty much covers all of the mechanical changes that were needed to convert a number 4 into an L8 7.62 millimeter rifle. The system for converting the number 4 into 7.62 NATO was actually first done by the Sterling Company commercially in England, and they patented their conversion system, their idea. I think it was the magazine that they actually patented. And they wanted to sell this commercially. They figured maybe we can sell them to the British government to make number 4s into reserve rifles before there's a lot of FALs that are available for reserve service, or maybe we can sell them to other Commonwealth nations, or maybe we can just sell them to countries that have number 4 rifles that want to be using that new standard ammunition. However, they had lined up some sales to places like India. India, by the way, eventually had its own conversion of the number 1 rifle to the 2A and 2A1s in 7.62 NATO, but the British never really made any effort to convert number 1 Enfields, only number 4s. Anyway, Enfield, British military arsenal, came up with a very similar system for converting the number 4 in the early 1960s. In fact, it was so similar that it landed them in a bunch of patent infringement cases with Sterling, and that would drag on for a few years. Ultimately, it kind of killed Sterling's business, because by the time all the patent issues were sorted out, the urgency of converting number 4 rifles to 7.62 was kind of gone. A lot of the major military countries in the Commonwealth, or that had been in the Commonwealth, had plenty of FAL rifles in stock now, and they weren't that concerned. So Sterling was never able to sell very many of these. The British government did do, well, I don't know exactly how many conversions they did. It wasn't just a prototype, but it wasn't done in large numbers either. These had some accuracy issues. In order to get them to be accurate, they had to basically just drop most of the stock, put in a new free-floated barrel, and that was the design for the L42A1 Sniper, which was a number 4 action in 7.62 as a sniper rifle. And that actually worked out quite well for the British and would be in standard service for several decades. As a service rifle pattern, the L8 was completely unsuccessful and really didn't go anywhere. So I think 1,000 of them were sold to Sierra Leone, of all places. A handful of them went to New Zealand, where they were used by like the Forestry Service and some police agencies, and a number of them were used in cadet and training programs in the UK. But that's pretty much it. Today, they're quite scarce rifles. There are a small number of originals that did make it out onto the civilian market. However, there are also a lot of fakes and frauds, because this is not that difficult of a rifle to try and put together a fake copy of. So hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully, if you're looking at getting an L8, this will give you some idea of what a proper one is supposed to look like, help you get away from any potential fraudulent ones. And well, thanks for watching.